This rule is no dating before you are 16, and then after 16, you're only supposed to go on group dates until you turn 18.
He's complaining that 18-year-old girls can't date for marriage, which is a very anti-feminist thing to say.
We were talking about cringe earlier. I don't know what's more cringe than teenage pregnancy.
And now it's time to consider the path of your feet, for crying out loud.
Video from the Jen Psaki of anti-members, Alyssa Grenfell. The reason why we call her Jen Psaki is that she can spin anything to fit this negative narrative that she has. Do you remember when Jen Psaki, the big Afghanistan debacle that happened where there were people literally hanging onto planes as they were flying out? That. They were like, please don't leave us to the Taliban. And Jen Psaki went on record saying, we cannot call the Afghanistan evacuation anything but a success. Anyway, so I'm just going to throw that out there. But so we're going to listen to what she has to say about Mormon dating rules.
Rules around dating growing up in my very devout Mormon home, and these 17 rules for celestial dating that someone posted on Reddit the other day are exactly the type of thing I would get handed growing up in church. The biggest rule is no dating before you are 16, and then after 16, you're only supposed to go on group dates until you turn 18. You're not really supposed to pair off and be boyfriend-girlfriend until the man has served a Mormon mission, which is 2 years, which means that at 18, as a girl, you're really only supposed to be dating men who are 20, 21, or older. Girls are told that they'll be a distraction to young men if they choose to date them too seriously before men serve their Mormon mission and accomplish their duty to God. Next, we've got 2 rules about making out, or what Mormon leaders often refer to as necking and petting. I was taught that before marriage, you should really only kiss someone in the way you would kiss them in front of your parents or Jesus himself. Definitely don't ever let them take you home, and never go into a bedroom with someone. And at BYU, it is against the school rules to enter a bedroom of someone of the opposite sex. This one cracks me up because it says you are not allowed to give back rubs, and those are reserved for married people. It does say that both young women and young men are expected to be modest, but if you look up the citation he's noted here in this book, you'll read that the entire page is about how girls should never wear shorts.
Ooh, all right. Wait. There's a lot to unpack. I'll let you start. Where do you want to begin?
Okay. A couple things. This is some rando bishop just creating rules, right? So, thank goodness we have a well-organized, well-structured church that can help see these things and be like, no, we actually have, actual outlines and guidelines for these things. Random bishops just can't go and start making doctrine, right? So that's kind of nice. That's nice that we can acknowledge that. She's not acknowledging this, obviously. She's taking this, and it's very interesting at the beginning. She says, this is exactly the type of thing I would be handed in church. So you never actually got this when you were in, when she was young. That all that aside, so bishops shouldn't just go off making their own rules. Leave that for the strength of youth and things like that. She's obviously saying she got these kind of things when she was young. I don't remember getting anything like this. I remember having some guidelines like these, and all those guidelines, almost all those guidelines she read were actually really good ideas.
No, they were cringe,
know, right?
No, they were weird.
They were bizarre. Serious dating until after your mission. She's complaining that 18-year-old girls can't date for marriage at age 18, which is a very anti-feminist thing to say, I think. She's
how dare you?
18-year-old girls to pair off immediately? Shouldn't they go live their life and date less seriously? I thought that was the whole thing. Should you go hang out and French kiss and alone in a bedroom with your steady girlfriend of 3 years? Maybe not. Maybe that's a bad idea. Maybe that'll lead to some things that are really hard to recover from, So I don't see why these are bad things to put in place. And she doesn't really cover why they're not good. She just says that they're not good.
Right. So, it's just kind of a ha-ha kind of thing. Hey, look at how these silly guys and look at their silly little rules. And there's a couple of call-outs. First of all, I do agree with you that I've seen local leaders and maybe even professors at school that create these PowerPoint mini rules and laws and their own mini doctrine and stuff like that. And they pass that out to everybody. And I personally, this is my opinion, but every time a PowerPoint is created, a Pharisee gets its wings. And I think that that's why I love this for the strength of youth is because what's really happening is a local leader or a professor or someone that's close to you is getting in the way of your personal revelation based off of the principles that were taught in For the Strength of Youth. Now, For the Strength of Youth, when we were growing up, was more specific. It did say things like no serious dating until you're about 16, and then just try and keep it to double dates and stuff like that. It was still pretty hands-off when we were growing up. The other point that I did want to call out is her language. So, if you noticed, she was calling, anytime she made mention about like teenagers, she would calling teenage boys men, and she called the teenage young women, she called them girls. So there, it may be slight, but I did notice that. My ears did perk up a little bit, like, wait a second, she's calling these guys men, when the age difference between like an 18-year-old girl and a returned missionary is like 2, maybe 3 years. So I don't know. It seemed like she was trying to create this weird power structure kind of thing. She was trying to frame it a little nefariously, and I don't agree with that.
Honestly, like, let's not all, like, why are we pretending that the church isn't doing a huge favor to women by taking them out of the dating pool for a couple years while they're young and stupid? You know, like, just take them out of that dating pool, let them mature on a mission for a couple years. You know?
Yeah.
Let them grow up a little bit and let them come home a little more capable, a little more developed as a human.
Yeah.
I think that does a huge thing for them. I don't think, you know, if I was a young woman at age 18, I probably wouldn't want to date a 19-year-old given how dumb 19-year-old boys are, right?
Yeah.
Kick them off to spiritual boot camp for 2 years and let them come back actual men, you know?
Well, I think it was Cleon Skousen who said, I left for my mission as a man, and I arrived at my mission as a boy. You know? It made him realize, like, oh, man, the world is a big place, and you have to contend with that. And as a young man on a mission, you are face-to-face with so many different kinds of families, and you get to see firsthand the consequences of breaking the law of chastity, of single motherhood. You get to see all of these different types of families, and it kind of helps you to see the pathway of the different feet of these people that have chosen different paths and where that's going to lead you, so that when you get back home, you learn that lesson and you say, wait a second, I saw where being promiscuous, I saw where that pathway goes. And it's not a pathway that I want for myself, and I'm going to choose fidelity. I'm going to choose chastity. I'm going to choose a healthy, stable, happy family, because those were better off for the mother, the father, the children, everyone else. Everyone in the family is better off when everyone is staying together and they're happy. So I don't know. The other piece. Oh, hold on. I cut you off. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, when I heard similar things when I was growing up, not to this extent, but I still had a girlfriend in high school. You know, I still did things that I thought as a young man I should do. These rules are here because a bishop saw that a lot of kids were messing up, and he wanted to give a guideline to them and their parents. He was really kind of overstepping. It's really it's really the parents should be doing this. Yeah. So what he's doing is he's trying to teach them over the parents, and the parents are not picking up the slack. So this is a parental failure. What we're seeing, these guidelines popping out. To the same point, they're just helpful guidelines, you know, like they're not doctrine, they're not anything like that. So
you didn't face any kind of discipline because you had a girlfriend in high school? Is that?
I wasn't, like ostracized. I couldn't pass a
excommunicated.
No, I had a girlfriend and it was just fine because I followed a lot of the other rules besides the, not steady dating one. But all the other ones, it's like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do terrible things with your girlfriend. Like, okay, yeah, I'll follow that one,
Yeah.
Because it led to me not making any major mistakes or, things that could impact my future, spiritually or not. Like, it helped me keep safe my future and prepare me to have a much healthier, stable family later on in life. So I think it's great to keep young, stupid kids from making big mistakes, because that's all it was. When you're a teenager, you're filled with hormones, you're going crazy. Like all the parents are trying to do is like help you survive that time of life, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, do we give them rules? Do we, what do we do? So if this is just like a panic response from a bishop, trying to help the youth get through some of the hardest times of their lives.
Yeah.
And do I agree with those rules? No. Like a couple of them are just silly, but most of them will lead to a really good time. Just lead to a really peaceful life without major stress or drama, and just the headache of trying to deal with all those things. I didn't have to deal with because I followed most of those rules. Yeah,
you're touching down on a really important point, the difference between a standard and a law. So we have like the law of chastity, right? We have that has consequences when you break it, and there are serious big consequences. We were talking about cringe earlier. I don't know what's more cringe than like teenage pregnancy, like being pregnant in high school, or like single motherhood is really, really hard. And that is a burden that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy, is having to raise a child by yourself. I think church leaders see that, and they see like, oh man, these are some really big consequences. And if these kids aren't careful, they could wind up having to deal with that firsthand, and that comes with really big emotional bills. So a standard is something that should it's something that you should aim toward, but you're not going to find the same kind of consequences if you don't adhere to a standard as you would as if you broke a law. So for example, like when I was about to get married at BYU, Idaho, I had to meet with Chanel's bishop with her. So we both met with her bishop to have some kind of interview before we got married. And so he ran us through the interview. We got out of the interview, and then he was like, I'm just going to give you guys some rules because I know that your wedding is like a couple months out. And so I was like, all right, sure. And I don't remember a lot of the rules, but the only ones that I remember, he was just like, all right, so when you're in the car, just make sure that you're in different rows of the car when you're driving together. And then just make sure that if you're talking on the phone, that you don't talk on the phone for long periods of time. And I was just like, I did not understand that at all. And I was just like, okay, I understood though, to separate this guy from the institution of the church. I was just okay, this guy. But I also understood the reason why he was giving us these rules is because he has had to deal with a lot of people who faced really heavy consequences, and he probably had to help a lot of people walk through the repentance process and face so much sorrow and suffering because of it. And he's saying, you can avoid that just by doing X, Y, and Z. Now, I was old enough that I understood, like, okay, that's you. I understand the law of chastity. I've prayed about it. I know what I need to do. I know what I'm not going to do. I had already set up my own personal standards for dating. And so I took his advice and I kind of set it aside and I said, okay, I understand it. I appreciate that you gave me that. I know where it's coming from. Great. It really didn't apply to us because Chanel was a country apart for our entire engagement. Like she went home to be with her family before we got married. So I was just like, all right, yeah, whatever. But I was able to separate that, it's just like, and that's what you need to do is just like, this is just a person. You should probably separate that from the institution of the church and say, this is a guy, and it's coming from a place of love. Like, I don't see this as this like manipulative, power hungry guy who's just trying to get people to obey his little rules or anything like that. It's just like, no, he cares about you and he wants you to stay happy. And he knows that your happiness in this life and in the next life depends on your family situation. And like you're going to be very, very happy if you can be in a stable marriage where both partners are faithful to each other, the mother and father love each other, and the kids are raised in a healthy, happy home.
Right. Well, and to your point, like, I think that it is out of love, right? Because a lot of people don't realize that the church leaders are completely powerless over you, right? Yeah. Like, what else can they do except share with you what they think you should do? That's all they can do is share their rules and guidelines on how to approach this. Because, I mean, there's some out there, probably some bishops who, if they could force you, they probably would, right? But they can't. Yeah. They can't do that. So the thing that all these ex-Mormons and anti-Mormons who kind of pull up these rules and say, I was forced to live this way, they always forget, or I guess they weren't listening in class, is that you have free agency. That's like one of the pillar principles in our gospel is free agency. And when things like these come out, like these rules for celestial dating, your agency is implied. The only way these can come out as these suggestions is to help you in your agency make the best choice. So when I hear people say, I was forced to follow these rules, well, you need to talk to your parents for one, because your parents are the ones who are impacting your agency at that age, if anyone. They're the only ones who can. Right. So it wasn't the church, it wasn't the bishop. The bishop just wrote this letter and gave it to you and your family and said, please just don't do these things. And then your parents are the ones saying, hey, these are the rules of the house. And then you're the one being rebellious and gothic in your basement, wishing you could go and make out with everybody you could see. Right. So like that's
everyone has an emo phase. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it all drills down, is that, no one was ever forced to live by these rules by the bishop. It just doesn't work. Right. And if you did have an instance like that where the bishop was trying to force you to follow rules that weren't per the church's guidelines, then that's a bad bishop. He doesn't, you gotta, like you said, extract him from the foundation of the church there and say, this is a weird guy who's doing weird things and shouldn't be listened to. So everyone needs to stop turning off their brains and actually use their agency to take this information, take the rules from that are good, right? And then just put aside the other ones that you don't want to follow. Like, that's not going to serve me at all.
Yeah.
It's almost like we have a personal direct connection with Christ, and we can use revelation to maneuver our way through life. This is a crazy concept. Yeah. Something we all seem to forget as soon as a bishop hands us a to-do list like this, Yeah. It's like, okay, well, I don't know. If people are going to turn off their brains like that, then they deserve a checklist of things to avoid or to do.
The other part that I wanted to touch down on was the BYU campus rule thing about like, hey, you're not allowed in the bedroom of someone else at BYU. Let's keep in mind, this is a tithing subsidized education of a private institution and a religious institution as well. You're complaining about the rules that they have set up. If you don't want those rules, there are so many other colleges out there. It's like, hey,
right.
I feel like you kind of know what you're getting yourself into when you sign up for BYU. Okay, like if you want the tithing subsidized education, then you should be expected to obey the basic laws of morality in the church. Am I wrong? Am I off on that? Like, it doesn't seem like we're asking too much.
Yeah, it's like going to a museum and be like, why are these bones everywhere? This is weird.
This is crazy.
Like, where do you think you went? You went to the church subsidized college where they set the rules very clearly. Nobody's forcing you to go there. In fact, a lot of people want to be there because of how prestigious it's been in the past, right? Like it's how good of a school it's been. So I don't know. That's just kind of silly. Like, if you want to be a part of the club, you have to follow the club's rules.
What this reminds me of is the original tale of Little Red Riding Hood. The story goes that the mother, she talks to her daughter. She says, hey, here's some things that we need to get to Grandma's house. So she packs her bag and she sends her on her way. But she gives her a very simple command. She just says like, hey, remember to stay on the path because the woods are dark. Little Red Riding Hood says, all right, I'll stay on the path. She goes, and then she meets a wolf almost immediately in the woods. And the wolf is just like, oh, hey, where are you going? And then she tells him all about Grandma's house. And so the wolf gets this idea, and he's like, oh, awesome. Well, in order to get to Grandma's house first, he says, why don't you start picking some flowers? So she's like, that's a great idea. Grandma would love flowers. So she goes off the path. She starts picking these flowers. And during that time, the wolf goes and eats Grandma, gets in her clothes, gets in the bed. And then she goes in there. She knocks on the door. The wolf comes in, and then the wolf eats her, right? And that would not have happened had Little Red Riding Hood just stayed on the path, because then the wolf wouldn't have had enough time to get to Grandma's house without Little Red Riding Hood being able to call somebody for help. So the moral of the story that I see here is these rules and dating and morality, they're all designed to keep you safe on the path and to keep you out of the woods, because there are plenty of strange paths in the woods that can lead to some very, very dark places.
And now it's time to be of good cheer, for heaven's sakes.
I found online a document of atheistic dating rules.
You found a list of atheist dating guidelines from some rando on the internet and are treating them like they apply to all atheists. That's crazy. I've never heard of someone doing that before.
It may seem a little off the cuff, but we're going to turn on our official Jen Psaki news reporter voice and give it our best shot. Instead of love at first sight, call it a series of dopamine and oxytocin responses, because nothing is sexier than reducing romance to brain chemistry.
No ghosting, because ghosts aren't real, but your lack of courtesy is.
No saying, we're soulmates. We don't have souls, just a highly compatible mix of neurotransmitters and shared trauma.
You must have at least 3 dates before sharing an existential crisis.
If you're on a date and they whisper, I believe in us, you must respond with extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and immediately demand a double-blind study on long-term compatibility.
No saying I love you, only I oxytocin you.
No saying morality exists without God right after you cut in line for drinks. We get it, you don't need a deity to be good, but maybe try proving it. Every relationship conflict must be settled by citing peer-reviewed studies. Feelings? No, no, no. Where's your empirical data on why leaving socks everywhere is annoying? With that,
those are awesome.
We're going to wrap up this segment, and we're going to just ask everyone to consider the path of your feet. I know that Alyssa also took all the benefits of the church. She found her husband in the church. She has a healthy, happy marriage because of that. I hope that her kids can have the same kind of healthy, happy relationship. I hope that my kids can have that as well. And that's going to come with some rules and some guidelines. It's going to come with a path. And if they can stay on it, it'll lead them to a very, very happy place. So for that reason, we call her to consider the path of her feet.